Hi everyone. I wanted to make this video to talk a little bit about my near-death experience that I had when I was a 3-year-old. I've had people being curious or interested in it, and it's usually something I sort of skip over when I'm telling my healing journey or when I'm sort of talking about things in a more general sense. So I thought I'd give you a flavor of that experience, that transmission, if you're interested. If you have never asked me about this and you're not the least bit curious, that is also welcome. Alright, so enjoy. So yeah, when I was 3 years old, I experienced a trauma, sexual and physical violence. For those of you who don't know, I won't go into heaps of detail about that here where I can help it, because it's not really the point of this video. So that was super challenging, of course, and very disorientating. However, as a 3-year-old, finding myself in that situation, there was just this kind of intuitive sense in me, because I was, still so young, still so fresh to the world. There wasn't so much, overthinking going on in my head. There was more just this innate natural call for help that I experienced in myself out to the universe. And so as I was experiencing the trauma at 3 years old, and I could feel like all this pain in my body and things like that, I already felt myself leave my body, and I felt myself kind of looking down from above. This is even before the physical injuries became sort of, fatal or near fatal. Even prior to that, I could feel myself sort of looking down on myself, and I could feel a sense of my connection to the universe in a way that I don't necessarily experience sort of in the same way when I'm just sort of moving about the world, driving the car or something now, although it's always going to be with me since that experience. But in this way that I think is maybe not something that most of us experience in our kind of day-to-day human life. I experience myself as a resonant frequency, and I guess, these words, hopefully you feel the transmission, because it is a bit of a challenging one to put into words, but a resonant frequency with the entire universe, looking down on my physical body and witnessing what was unfolding. And the first thing I remember from that is the sense of stillness and the sense of quiet. I was a long way up. I could feel myself very high up, not just above the room, but sort of almost amongst the stars, feeling up in the night sky, looking down at myself and feeling the quietness around me and the peacefulness of that, and also watching what was unfolding. And the powerful juxtaposition of that is a transmission for me in itself that I will never forget. I'm getting to the actual near-death experience, but this is part of it, the powerful juxtaposition between no matter what is happening, no matter the chaos that's going on, and the pain that we can be experiencing, there is always a still point, and the still point is always full of love. And it doesn't mean that we should be able to feel it, or that it's not true that it can be incredibly challenging to be feeling a lot of pain and to feel lost in that experience in human life. But just that lived experience of that will never be lost to me. And so I'm grateful for that. And then as what unfolded, so I'm going to take a sip of water so you can take a minute to breathe as well if you like. Yeah, and so then as what unfolded in the room unfolded, and there was more damage to my physical body, and I'll kind of skip forward a few steps here because this is quite more damage to my physical body. And then there came a point where I started to become aware of having less connection to my physical body, to the physical plane. The best way I can experience it is like if I was in a big pond and I'd been tied to this quite heavy puddle, like in the density sense, but also in the kind of, the grounded sense. I'd been tied, to this big pebble. I don't know if I said that right. I'm in a pond and I'm tied to this big rock, just to make that clear. I started to feel myself less connected to that rock and more just floating in this lighter feeling, and kind of less of a sense of the vision of like what the rock could see, less of a sense of its experience of that level of kind of heaviness and density, and more just floating into a lightness. And as that happened, it became clear that sort of maybe slightly behind me there was this, I would experience it, I know a lot of people have spoken about like a tunnel of light. I kind of experience it more as just an experience of a gateway. Kind of like you see like the classical portals in like sci-fi TV shows, but it's like it kind of like starts out wide and then it's like an opening, but then what it opens into for me was, I didn't experience so much as a tunnel. I think the transition for me is just my experience, my perspective. I think the transition can be experienced as a tunnel, if that makes sense. The transition from being here to being in spirit, from being in physical life to being in spirit, can be experienced as a tunnel. However, for me, it was more just a kind of opening that was clearly some kind of delineation in a gentle sense between a here and a there, but in any case, it was full of light, and at the same time, I recognized it as me, and not me in the small ego sense me, like I'm Laura and I like hummus, although it included that, but me in the sense that I belong to this. I am native to this and it's native to me. There is no separation between me and this thing. We are the same resonance. And so in that sense, it was just sort of a mirror of me, but a bigger version. And there was a sense that I'd lost, a very gentle kind of, felt sort of almost unimportant sense that I'd lost like a final vestige of connection to that rock at the bottom of the pond in a certain way. And then I was invited across this threshold, gentle threshold. I didn't experience it as a big delineation. And space-time became much less of a thing at this point in the story. So again, it becomes more challenging to tell a story about a discrete series of events at this point. Because those kind of stories, in my experience, are the sort of stories we tell on Earth about this happened and then this happened and then this happened, because space-time here is very much something that's like a fixed agreement that we understand works in a certain way, and there are discrete concepts because of this, yes, and a discrete series of events. In any case, I'll do my best. And so now I was in spirit. Spirit is everything at once. And so immediately what drops out is any sense of pressure or rush or separation between me and that, or me and them, or me and this. Spirit is everything at once in a giant cosmic hug of oneness, because everything is everything else. And so what I experienced in that feels like actually a loss of a whole lot of things that just suddenly became just not even relevant. Things that just don't matter when you're in a state of absolute knowing of the oneness. And just an abiding sense of the peace underneath all of those other things, like once they were all gone. Peace. Peace. Just peace. And any information that's relevant, any sense of things that you need to know or understand in order to that might be relevant for you to need to know or understand, you would just know instantaneously, and you would know not in the linear sense, but just like transmitted to you all at once because of the space-time difference. There's no space-time. But it's not overwhelming because it's just the oneness. And if you're not making yourself separate to the oneness, if you are the oneness as well, then there's nothing to be overwhelmed by in the oneness. So much clarity of being in that. And I feel like since I've come back into being a human, which I did at 3 and then sort of lived my life, so, you know, it's been a while since then. But I always remember this transmission of spirit. It's always there for me. I haven't my whole life, but once I remembered it, it's always been there for me. Since I've come back and, you know, now being a human and as an adult human, that clarity of being is something that I think is for me, is like one of the most challenging things about being a human is not having that, or can be, not having that. You know, there can be this searching and this disenfranchisement, or this, what's the right word? This disconnection from ourselves in having clarity of being. And then we can think, you know, at a very young age, we can kind of become disconnected. Sorry, I'm going off on a rant, but I'll be quick. You know, at a very young age, we can kind of become disconnected from our clarity of being, and then we can just forget that ever was there, or that we've become disconnected, and then we can layer all these beliefs onto that, like, well, maybe who I am as a being isn't lovable, there is no clarity of being to be had, or, you know, we can just, like, all of these things, maybe, like, it's not safe to have clarity, you know, to have clarity of being, or, like, it's just so, it becomes so many things, where, and then we can get really, disinherited from ourselves, and, like, that pure clarity of being. So, yeah, that's one transmission that, I hope you can feel from this, is just the clarity of being, of knowing exactly what I am in relation to creation, and that just being like a total no-brainer. And just so worthiness, like all that stuff is just like, why would you feel unworthy? Like, that's insane. Like, what does that even mean? Like, I am the isness that is everything, you know, like, so, you know, and that's easy to say, you know, and then in our human experience, it's about remembering and reawakening to this fact that this is actually the truth. But yeah, in spirit, that's all so self-evident, it just seems funny to even bring it up. And so, to kind of carry on in space-time this story, because this is a video on Earth that I'm making for you, you know, and so I had this experience, I got downloaded all of this information, it's the best way I can describe it. I became aware of all of these things that were relevant for me to become aware of, sort of, this is what I need to know, this is the connections I need to have in spirit, this is what will, you know, in a broad sense happen in my lifetime if I choose to go back on Earth, this is what's going to happen, this is what's going on Earth that you could go back for and be a part of in this way, this is what's going to happen in a broad sense in the reality that you're a part of. Do you want to go back? And obviously there wasn't like a dude who asked me that. It was just like I had the option. I had the choice to go back. And in that clarity of being and in that peace and in that oneness and in that knowing of what I am, I said, yes, I would like to go back. I want to be a part of this. This feels interesting and exciting to me. And so there was a heartbeat after that where I almost took like a psychic, like a screenshot. I want to say a screenshot of the energy there to bring back with me. And that energy has held me steady. I've had a lot of stuff happen to me in my life, apart from this thing, and that screenshot has, in that, just a heartbeat, just a calm heartbeat, has held me steady. And it's the knowing of the truth of who we actually are that we remember when we're in spirit, and that we can become disconnected from, in my experience on earth. And then I was ready, and so I came back down into my body. And the way I experienced it, I have a little bit of amnesia around the coming back down. I just remember kind of being in my body, feeling really uncomfortable, in my 3-year-old body. This is, after the attack that I'd experienced, feeling really uncomfortable, very disorientated, because I'd been 3 years old, then I'd been in spirit, and now I was back in my body. And all of these kind of strange and crazy things that happened to me in the interim, a big extreme range of very, very challenging to very, very beautiful and empowering. And my body felt strange. I felt different in it. I won't kind of drag you into this aspect of the experience, but, it was very disorientating. And really the next few years of my life, I came back into my body. My body was kind of healed of its injuries, in, I guess, what we would experience on Earth as a miraculous healing. And so that led to even more confusion because, without going into heaps of detail, the first responders, being my parents who had gone out looking for me, were kind of panicked and terrified because they couldn't find me at home. And they kind of had a sense that something extreme had happened because they were very intuitive. But then I looked, even though it took a while to wake up, I looked kind of fine. When I finally woke up, I seemed kind of normal. And so I got this sort of strange response to, I've just had this huge experience, but I looked kind of normal. And so that meant that I didn't really get the help that I needed. So it was all very disorientating, and led, and then I had lots of challenge throughout my childhood going forward from there, because I'd taken on all these juicy trauma patterns from that experience. But the main point of this video is, to, I guess, remind us, those of us who are here in our physical reality life, here living as humans, that is always there as a resource. And it's something that I have used as a resource so much throughout my life. The fact that we are that loved. So I wanted to share a little bit about that story, both the words and a little bit of the transmission of, as I describe the experience. Hopefully you can feel a flavor of the energy of that experience that I had when I crossed over, that's held me through so many things, and helped me to heal so many things. So sending you so much love. Thanks for staying with me till this point in the video, and I look forward to connecting with you again in perfect timing. So much love.